In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of Finding God. We are still on chapter 56, Surah As-Safat, those ranged in ranks, and we've covered over 100 verses, 114 to be very exact, verses of this chapter. And today we'll go from verse 114 till verse 148, where we cover the stories of some prominent figures in Islam and human history, so to speak, because we're talking about great men of the past. Yes, it's all men. That's why I say great men of the past, and some commonalities in their stories is what we certainly refer to. Last time, yeah, we came up all the way up till here, didn't we? Okay. Before I dive in, we were talking about Abraham and Noah last week. Both important Abrahamic, biblical, religious figures, parts of human history. One thing that God is providing Muhammad, peace be upon him, is examples of people from the past. Because we have to understand that written evidence only became very common in the last 1,000 years. Paper and writing and printing was developed in China, and Gutenberg had a printing press. Like, there was printing happened of replicated material on paper. Is a relatively new phenomena if we look at all of human history. So imagine that it's almost 1,500 years ago. Let's say 523 AD, or let's say 1,400 years ago, 623 AD. And you're sitting there, and this fellow is coming, and he's proselytizing, and he's stating facts, and he's referring to some history and some reality, and then he's saying, well, all of the gods that you believe in are not the right gods. Instead, these are the gods that we ended up believing in, and so forth. And you start saying, well, prove it. At that time, there's no semblance of the scientific method. There's no, well, look, I have all these research papers. I have this example. I've done these tests, these falsification methods. That didn't exist. It was all oral. It was argumentation. And it wasn't argumentation based on delivering evidence, scrutiny, the scientific method, trial and error. It wasn't that. It was, you would appeal to, if not emotion, you would appeal to the past or appeal to examples. I'm trying to put forward the point that imagine a world where we can't write anything, we can't present anything. Think of it today. The computer, PowerPoint, now ChatGPT and Brilliant.ai and Beautiful.ai, sorry, I'm mixing. All these AI-based apps which can generate a presentation for you with the snap of a finger, all of it didn't exist. No computers existed. No papers existed. Writing something wasn't very common. It was rare. Reading something and saying, now I understand what it meant, was very uncommon. Try to go back to that world. In that world, to say something along the lines of, well, look, I built this chair myself because I know how to do this, therefore I can build you a table. That wasn't really common. You would appeal to people's emotions. You'd appeal to known facts about the past. And based on those agreements, you would make your case. And then you would share foresights and visions of the future. You do all of that. There was very little, look, here's a paper published which proves that there is a God. To prove God, to believe in God as living, is oxymoronic and problematic in and of itself. Because God, as far as we believe, is not bound by time. I always make the argument between faith and rationality. You don't use a microscope to look at a star, and you don't use a telescope to look at a microorganism. We have two lenses to look at two different things. So, to try to look at God through a scientific lens, you'd end up dissatisfied. Even though I find that to be a much better explanation than pure chance. Oh, we are here by pure chance. I find the intelligent design, the creator, the first mover um, argument much stronger than, oh, it all happened by chance, where a billion and one fluke. I find that more convincing than this one. That's just, you could say that about anything. I could make the argument that there's no such thing as gravity. There's a ghost called gravitasum, and gravitasum is everywhere and acts as what we have come to call gravity. But in fact, it's a ghost. Prove it? Can't. But it's there. You can test it, falsify it. You call it a force, I call it a ghost. It becomes that. It becomes you're trying to bring two different worlds together, which don't always align because we're using different lenses. Anyway, I digress. So, in this regard, in this world and at this time, Muhammad isn't being told, look, I built the trees, therefore I'm that big and that small. He's being giving examples of great men of the past, of what they've shared with their people. And then that is the message that Muhammad gives his people. But at the same time, Muhammad is being told that you are like one of those great men of the past. Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus, so many great men have existed before you. You are one of them. That is why the example is being given to you. They did it, now you're doing it, and this happened to them, and the same will happen to you. So he's being lionized and also being given avenues to share with his people. I will start with verse 114. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. And indeed we gave our grace to Moses and Aaron, and we saved them, their people, from the great distress, and helped them so that they became the victors, and guided them to the right path. And we left for them a goodly remembrance among the later generations. Salam, peace be upon Moses and Aaron. This is the common thread. Verily, thus do we reward the Muhsinin, the good doers. We've discussed this word in great detail. I can't wait to take a deep dive into this word when I'm on chapter 2, verse 112, because it's a big, big chapter. And I think I'll spend a month and a half, maybe 2 months, once a week, talking about that very chapter, because it's a very big chapter. Verily, there were two of our believing slaves, Moses and Aaron. And then the next story. It's so beautiful. Imagine poetry about great figures of the past being taught in a religious lens. It's so wonderful how it's interwoven together. And verily, Elias was one of the messengers. See, it's so smooth. First it was Noah, then Abraham, then Moses and Aaron, and now Elias, and then there'll be more after. When he said to his people, will you not fear God? Will you call upon Baal, a well-known idol of his nation when they used to worship and forsake the best of creators, God, your Lord and the Lord of your forefathers? So this is Baal is quite famous in Anglophone, Germanic, and some other countries. The name I've seen it come up. It was well-known figure. Oh, Baal. And Elias was questioning them. So you're going to worship this instead of what I'm saying? So it's the same argumentation. But Muhammad is being told Elias was this great man. He was denied, and you're like him, so don't worry, because that's what it says. But they denied him, so they will certainly be brought forth to the punishment, except the chosen slaves of God. Again, the same message is being given to Muhammad over and over again. And we left for him a goodly remembrance among the later generations. A goodly remembrance. So we remember his name fondly, and we send blessings upon his name. Salam, peace be upon Ilyasin or Elias. Verily, thus do we reward the Muhsinun for God's. Verily, he was one of our believing slaves, and it will repeat. And verily, Lot was one of the messengers. When we saved him and his family, all except an old woman, his wife, who was among those who remained behind, then we destroyed the rest, the town of Sodom and the place of the Dead Sea now in Palestine. Interesting. Sodomy, Lot. Lot's people are famous for this. If you recall, a few weeks, if not months ago, we covered a story about Abraham being greeted by angels and Lot then going to Lot's house because Lot was Abraham's nephew. And all the people of the land were coming and saying, who are these beautiful men? Because sodomy, homosexuality, sodomy was very, very common in that civilization. And I remember discussing about what was right then, what we consider right today, blah, 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 where Islam stands upon it, I remember. So we don't have to deep dive into that again. Then we destroyed the rest of the town of Sodom and the place of the Dead Sea now in Palestine. Verily, you pass by them in the morning and at night, will you not then reflect? I love this couplet. You pass by them in the morning and at night, will you not then reflect? This couplet can be applied even to today. We could say the same thing today. And I sometimes think about this. For example, I was running this morning and I run in the park, which is in the center of Montreal here, called Montréal. And I run, and I'm running with a lot of focus. I don't look at other people. I don't look at the park around me. I just focus and I run. But after about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, I look up and I start looking at things and I say, look at these trees. Look at this land. Look at the fresh air. Look at the wind. Look at the sunlight. Look at all the beauty that I'm surrounded by. Look at that squirrel. Look at that duck. Look at that rabbit. Blah, blah, blah. I look at all of it, and all of a sudden I start thinking, what are you focused on? Breathing and running? Great. But make sure not to lose sight of all of this. This is what we fight for. This is what we run for. This is what keeps us alive. This is what sustains us. If you're too busy running in your own little rhythm, tunnel vision, you'll miss out everything. And I try to remind myself of that because it's a metaphor for how we equate our careers with our lives. Careers are nothing, to be very frank. I'm incredibly ambitious, very driven. You know, everyone who knows me knows that. But I'm not career driven. I'm mission driven. I have goals in mind. Career or no career, I have to reach those goals. That's about it. Our career is typically between 22 and 65 and something like that. 40 years of work and then you wait to die, right? That's typically the life of a normal person. But in that time, we don't really take time to reflect. Every time we walk by a building, just take a moment and say, this was built by people like me. There were no giants, there were no gods, there were no magical elephants who built this. I built this. I am a part of the human civilization for thousands of years. I built this great pyramid, this great empire state, this Burj Dubai, this great Hagia Sophia dome. I built all of this. And you sit and reflect, if I am capable of this, am I not capable of that? Can I not pass an exam? Can I not learn how to drive? Can I not run again? So many things. If you just sit and reflect, you start realizing there's so much in me that I haven't even touched upon. Why am I so overly concerned? I understand I'm digressing a bit, but this is very important. There are couplets like this in the Quran. Verily, you pass by them in the morning, and at night will you not then reflect? It's so interesting. It could be a grave. I run in the graveyard. There are running routes in the graveyard, and sometimes it's so quiet in the graveyard. And while running, I sometimes look at people's names, and I stop because while you're running, I don't listen to music. I'm running, and I look at people's graves, and I say, Tobias or Elias or John or whoever. So some names I saw recently. And I'd say, this must have been a great king or a pauper or a beggar or just a normal everyday person. At the end of the day, he's still one with the soil. There are no parades. All the parades and magic in the world cannot bring him back. And I try my best to reflect upon it That's why running in the graveyard really helps, because it's physical training but also spiritual. So at night, will you not then reflect? It's so interesting. And verily, Jonah was one of the messengers. When he ran to the laden ship, then he agreed to cast lots. And he was among the losers. Then a big fish swallowed him, as he had done an act worthy of blame. Yes. Had he not been of them who glorify God, he would have indeed remained inside its belly till the day of resurrection. Jonah's life was a tough one. He made a mistake and then got swallowed. But we cast him forth on the naked shore while he was sick, and we caused a plant of gourd to grow over him, and we sent him to 100,000 people or even more. And they believed, so we gave them enjoyment for a while. This is where the story stops. So we know Jonah's story. We've discussed it before, why he was swallowed by the big fish, and then he was spat out after a few days. But imagine that! One of my only fears, which I've sufficiently fought back, and I think I've defeated it quite readily, almost defeated all of it, is deep water. I'm afraid of going deep into the ocean or the sea where even the light doesn't reach. I'm afraid of that depth, that darkness, because I'm powerless there. I can't breathe. And if I'm swallowed by an animal and I come out, there's still a kilometer or two of swimming which I have to do to get out. So imagine being Jonah in a fish, and the fish takes you deep into the ocean. Imagine that. Because it's not a soundproof container. We're just inside, reclining on your chair, not hearing anything. You're inside. It's all dark. Maybe there's other animals or something that the fish has swallowed. You can't eat. You can't see. There's no lighter. There's no phone to light up your area. There's no match, or there's no what is it? I'm blanking. I can see it when you light a torch. Sorry, there's no torch that you say, "Oh, I'm inside a big whale. Oh, that's what it looks like. Maybe I'll go into that corner." None of it. And it's not that the whale or the fish is quiet. It's making its own sound. It's making all those sounds. It's deep into the water. And you're hearing all the water around you and other animals. Imagine having that experience. Isn't that an insane experience? And then, because Jonah was a man of God, he was spat out, and then obviously he repented. I'll cover this next week. That's exactly why I'm stopping here. He was spat out, and he's on the land now, and on the land he's obviously asking God for forgiveness. And those great stories are so diluted today. Like, I remember reading once, I haven't tested the veracity of this, but there is a belief that when Adam was cast out of heaven and onto the earth to beg forgiveness from God, he prostrated on every inch of the earth. I don't know how true that is, because that would be very difficult. But we hear stories like this all the time. And if you go to the Middle East, or if you go to South Asia, India, you hear stories of these gurus and learned men or sacred people and holy people who go away into the forest for 5-10 years on end. And they just sit in there and they worship, and they're quiet, and they're just silent, and they're there, and they're not eating, and they're not doing anything. They're just there and silent, and they're in nature. And snakes don't attack them, and lions don't bite them, and they're just there, and they're part of it. And they're able to understand so much about life. Those experiences are incredibly important. That's why Jonah's experience, I find that to be quite marvelous. Because it's like, we've seen this in movies, but we've seen that today. Jonah was a while ago. It's a while ago. Anyway, what's important here is that Muhammad is being told, look at that guy. He was a man of God. He went through that kind of trouble, and we still brought him out. Look at that other guy. All his people were involved in sodomy. We saved him there. Look at that other guy. There was a big flood. Look at that other guy. He had to slaughter his son. Look at Moses. Look at Aaron. Look at Elias. Look at all of them. All these have come before you. Don't worry. Don't worry. All of these people have come before you. How is it possible that all of them have similar experiences to you, and we saved all of them? We'll save you too. Don't worry. So I think what I find so beautiful about the Quran is that, one, it is a message for the people, whether it's the people of Mecca or it's the people of today, or it's the people of Adam or wherever. It's a prescriptive guide on humanity and how to be a human. It's a very clear guide, but at the same time, it is the Lord's letter of support and love to Prophet Muhammad. Every opportunity we see he's being supported and cuddled and loved, and the Lord Almighty is showering him with blessings and support and strengthening him all the time. All the time. It's so interesting to me how that's possible. Ooh, what's happening? Yeah. It's so interesting how the Quran is this, and you're supporting Muhammad. Don't tell them you're a messenger. Tell them you're just a warner. You're not supposed to solve their problems. Just give them a warning. Don't worry about this. Don't stay up all night. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't worry. You'll be fine. All of this is just the Lord of everything saying to one man, the greatest man, the most blessed man, but essentially one man who can live, die, breathe, bleed, eat, sleep, all of those things like we do. That one man is being addressed by the Lord of the heaven and the earth. It's going to be okay. Look, it happened to all these other great people. It'll happen to you. Don't worry. I find that to be incredibly wonderful. Incredibly. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. We will finish next week. We'll round up everything and we'll finish next week, hopefully. Till then, have a wonderful Friday, wonderful weekend. I shall see you